Welcome to Congress in Context. Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, an incredibly busy and maybe even surprising week on Capitol Hill. We're focusing specifically on September 10th, 2025. Lot happening.
A lot happening, that's true.
Yeah, from these really fierce debates, over defense spending and social policy, right down to some really heartwarming recognitions of community heroes. We're going to unpack the key takeaways. Our mission, as always, is to give you that shortcut, help you get well informed so you can really understand what's happening in Washington and, how it might impact you.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here, I think, is just the sheer breadth of topics Congress managed to tackle in, well, basically a single day. It offers this unique snapshot, doesn't it, of the nation's priorities, the challenges we're facing right now, while trying to connect these individual actions to the bigger picture, explore not just the what, but really the why behind the headlines and maybe what it means going forward.
Okay, let's dive in then. One of the biggest items on the House agenda was the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, fiscal year 2026.
Right, the massive annual defense bill.
Huge. And while its initial markup, that committee process where they hash things out was apparently overwhelmingly bipartisan, things seemed to shift pretty fast once it hit the House floor.
Yeah, one representative actually called it a very, very partisan exercise at that point.
So why does that happen? How does something start bipartisan and then kind of fracture?
Well, that's a crucial observation, right? Because the NDAA often gets broad support. But what we saw here is sort of a classic example. Even these foundational bills, once they hit the floor, and especially when you get a whole slew of amendments tacked on, well, they can fracture. And the NDAA, just by its nature, it attracts amendments on almost everything military, but also increasingly social policy. It kind of becomes this unexpected battleground for the culture wars.
And we definitely saw that. I mean, a huge part of the debate, some really heated moments centered on amendments about gender identity in the military. We had Representative Mace from South Carolina proposing an amendment to ban gender-affirming care for children with gender dysphoria within the military healthcare system.
Right. Her argument was that it increases risks in fertility, depression, anxiety. She called it a progressive fad that, in her view, hurts military readiness.
But there's immediate pushback.
Oh, yeah. Representative Stansbury from New Mexico countered pretty firmly. She said gender-affirming care is health care, period. And denying it actually harms military families and undermines readiness. She basically called the amendment part of a right-wing culture war.
So you see how this defense bill just becomes this mirror for these bigger societal debates.
Absolutely. And there was more along those lines. A related amendment tried to stop the Department of Defense from even collecting data on gender identity on forms. Only male and female options allowed.
What was the rationale there?
Proponents just cited basic biology.
Okay, and the opposition?
Well, Representatives Takano and Simon from California argued really strongly against it. They said it would essentially erase the existence of transgender people. And maybe more practically, hinder collecting data that's actually needed, to understand and address challenges LGBTQ plus service members face. Things like mental health support, inclusive environments.
Got it. And there was one more on this theme.
Yes, another amendment, also from Representative Mace, focused on ensuring single-sex spaces, think restrooms, locker rooms on military bases, are based on biological sex.
And did that one pass?
It did, yeah. Narrowly, though.
That's
219 ayes to 209 noes. Representative Mace cited some specific incidents in places like Virginia, California, Georgia, Oklahoma, where she argued allowing men into women's spaces caused safety and privacy problems, called it an affront to women.
Wow. Okay, so those are the internal debates shaping the military. But the NDA also became this crucible for how America engages with the world, right? Foreign aid came up big time.
Absolutely fierce arguments there. Representative Green of Georgia, she launched a very direct challenge, proposed an amendment to just prohibit all assistance to Ukraine, full stop.
All assistance. What was her reasoning?
She explicitly tied it to an America-only policy, pointed to the huge U.S. national debt, $37 trillion, and the $175 billion already sent to Ukraine.
That's a pretty stark position.
Yeah.
How did others react?
While there was strong opposition, Representative Smith of Washington and Turner of Ohio pushed back hard. They argued cutting aid won't actually end the war, and supporting Ukraine is, well, vital for U.S. national security interests. They pointed to intensifying Russian aggression, drone attacks, even incursions into Polish airspace. They really stressed the bigger picture implications.
And Representative Green wasn't finished. She had another target.
Right. She also moved to cut $1 billion in funding for the Taiwan Security Cooperation Initiative. Same reasoning. Basically, U.S. debt, prioritize America last, as she put it.
And the counter-argument there.
Came from Representative Takuda of Hawaii, among others. They really stressed Taiwan's critical role in its own self-defense, sure, but also as a deterrent against Beijing. And they highlighted the massive economic importance. I mean, Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, TSMC, produces something like 90% of the world's advanced AI chips.
90%, that's huge. So it's not just security, it's global economics.
Exactly, it's deeply intertwined.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, still within the NDAA. There were also amendments looking at military oversight and even domestic policy issues spilling over.
Yeah, Representative McCormick introduced one trying to prevent the DoD from contracting with entities that, he argued, censor conservative news outlets for military recruitment ads.
Censor how?
He cited groups like NewsGuard and the Global Disinformation Index, which he claimed unfairly label conservative media as risky. It taps into that whole tension over perceived media bias and its influence. That amendment passed, also narrowly. 219 to 211.
Interesting. What else?
Then we had Representative Rose pushing for accountability. He proposed an amendment requiring a report on the just shocking $108 million fraud scheme.
Oh, the one with the civilian army employee,
Yeah.
Janet Yamanaka Mello.
That's the one. Stole from a 4-H military partnership grant program.
Yeah.
Money meant for military kids. That amendment passed almost unanimously. 430 ayes to 3 noes. Shows you that accountability for taxpayer money, especially for military families, can still bring people together.
Absolutely. Good to see. Anything else significant on the amendment front?
Well, there was the Safe Research Act from Representative Molinar of Michigan. The idea is to stop federal research grants going to people or collaborators tied to hostile foreign entities. Requires a lot of disclosure restrictions.
Sounds complicated. Was there pushback?
Yeah, opponents argued it could actually stymie American innovation, said the definitions were too broad, could have a chilling effect on international research partnerships, which are often really valuable.
And then something about war powers.
Right, a notable bipartisan effort, actually, led by Representative Jacobs. They proposed repealing the old authorizations for use of military force, the AUMFs, from 2001 and 2002.
The post-9/11 authorization.
Exactly. Proponents argued it's essential for Congress to reclaim its constitutional war powers, end these endless forever wars. They noted presidents from both parties have kind of stretched those authorities over the years.
And one more, something about veterans.
Yes, Representative Austin Scott of Georgia introduced what's called Schedule V reporting. It would make defense contractors and universities with big contracts report annually on things like veteran employment numbers, spending with veteran-owned businesses, even volunteer hours for military causes.
So pushing for more tangible support for veterans from these big institutions.
That's the idea. More accountability, more transparency on how veterans are being supported.
Okay, so that's a whirlwind tour of the NDAA debate in the House. Meanwhile, the Senate wasn't exactly quiet, right?
Not at all. They were actually quite busy, though maybe less controversially. They cast several bills, quietly but significantly. Things addressing environmental threats like harmful algal blooms, S93, improving wildfire preparedness, the Fire Ready Nation Act, S306, also improving network outage reporting, S725, and importantly, categorizing public safety telecommunicators, 911 operators as a protective service, and a 759, the Modernizing Access to Our Public Oceans Act.
So important stuff, maybe less flashy, but dealing with real community issues.
Exactly. It's that steady, often overlooked work Congress does on everyday concerns.
But then there was the Epstein Amendment. This definitely got attention.
Ah, yes. Senators Schumer and Blumenthal, they pushed an amendment demanding the Attorney General release all records related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
All records, like what specifically?
We're talking flight logs, travel records, names of people, companies involved, any immunity deals, even internal DOJ communications about the case.
Wow, that's comprehensive. Any restrictions?
Well, this is the key part. The amendment explicitly says information can't be withheld just because it's, quote, embarrassing, causes reputational harm, or is politically sensitive.
So trying to preemptively block common reasons for secrecy.
Exactly. It does allow limited redactions, but only for victim privacy or genuinely active investigations.
So the intent is maximum transparency. But you've hit on the tension, right? Getting that level of release, the legal hurdles, the practicalities. That could be a huge battle.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be fascinating to see how much actually sees the light of day, assuming it passes and is implemented.
Okay, let's shift to the broader political dynamics. Beyond specific bills, What were the big clashes? We heard about budget fights.
Definitely. Democratic members were really vocal, launching strong attacks on what they called a big, ugly bill passed by Republicans. They alleged it gave trillions in tax breaks to the wealthy, while at the same time cutting health care for millions, hitting Medicaid, the ACA, Medicare, and also slashing nutrition benefits.
And they targeted the OMB director.
Yeah, they accused Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, of stealing funds, strong language, and deliberately trying to provoke a government shutdown. They basically vowed not to support what they saw as purely partisan spending bills.
Really highlights those deep divides over spending priorities, the role of government itself. Starkly different philosophies on display.
No question. And in the Senate, another major battleground was President Trump's nominations.
What was the issue there?
Republicans were accusing Democrats of obstruction. They pointed out that apparently 0% of Trump's nominees had been confirmed by a simple voice vote. They saw this as a major break from past practice, a deliberate slowdown tactic. They wanted to streamline the process.
And the Democratic response.
Well, senators like Schatz from Hawaii and Murphy from Connecticut voiced really deep concerns about the quality of some nominees. They used some pretty strong terms, conspiracy theorists, even Epstein apologists. They accused Republicans of basically ceding power to the president on key congressional roles like appropriations, tariffs, oversight.
So it wasn't just about the individuals, but a broader concern about checks and balances.
Exactly. Senator Murphy specifically called out one nominee, Aaron writes, for apparently refusing to commit that an elected official has to follow a court order. That kind of thing raises fundamental questions about the rule of law.
Wow. So these nomination fights really reveal these deep fault lines, don't they? It's not just procedural squabbling.
Not at all. It often gets to the heart of governance itself.
Yet, amidst all this conflict, there were these other moments. Moments of unity, moments of tribute.
Absolutely. In a really striking moment of unity, the Senate unanimously passed a resolution, S-383, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II.
That's powerful. And lots of individual recognitions, too.
Yeah, so many. Both chambers took time for heartfelt tributes. House members honored people like Malik, a former NBA ref known for promoting minority businesses, Herbert Bellamy Jr. for 33 years at the Buffalo Sewer Authority, Sabrina Walker-Hernandez, an Army vet and Boys and Girls Club CEO, Irene Scambaluri, a WWII survivor fighting for Chamorro war reparations on Guam.
It's a good reminder that Congress does connect locally, celebrates that diversity.
It really is. It shows that side of Congress that isn't just about policy fights, but about reflecting and honoring the fabric of American life, community by community.
And there were tributes related to civil rights history as well.
Yes, powerful speeches honoring Bishop Woods, a key moral leader from the Birmingham Civil Rights Movement, and also former U.S. Senator Fred Harris. He was celebrated for his work on Native American rights, civil rights generally, and the Great Society programs. Reminders of that long arc of justice.
We also saw a new member sworn in.
We did. James R. Walkinshaw from Virginia, representing the 11th District. And right away, he was highlighting his community's struggles, mentioning President Trump's economy, cuts to federal programs, rising costs. Shows how quickly new members focus on those kitchen table issues for their constituents.
Then there was a very somber moment related to Charlie Kirk.
Yes, truly somber. The House held a moment of prayer and silence after his assassination in Orem, Utah. Representative Schweikert from Arizona gave a passionate plea, urging people to engage with Kirk's actual messages, not propaganda, and reflecting on the, quote, burning hate in society.
Did others comment?
Senator Murphy also expressed horror at the political violence. It really underscored the dangerous climate and deep divisions we're seeing.
And another tribute, this one for law enforcement.
Also very moving, Representative Curtis of Utah honored Sergeant Lee Sorensen and Officer Eric Estrada, two police officers killed in Tremont in Utah. He praised their courage, their sacrifice, and called for support for law enforcement. These moments bring the human cost of service and societal issues right to the floor.
So let's try to pull back and connect these dots. What's the bigger picture analogy here? You mentioned the tension between branches.
Right. I mean, if you look at the fights over the budget, over tariffs, over nominations, it really underscores that fundamental push and pull between the executive and legislative branches, especially around Congress's constitutional power of the purse, controlling the money, and its advise and consent role for appointments. All these arguments about executive overreach, they point to this ongoing struggle, this perceived chipping away at congressional authority.
And you mentioned the filibuster in the Senate context earlier. Can you give us a bit more historical perspective on that?
Sure. It's kind of fascinating, actually. The term comes from Dutch freebooters, basically pirates demanding ransom. And historically in the Senate, it was famously used, most notably by Southern senators, for decades to block civil rights legislation. What's really striking now, though, is how often they're using cloture motions. That's the formal vote to end debate and force a vote. A chart shown in the Senate revealed this dramatic spike in cloture votes, specifically on nominations. It signals a major shift, a real disruption to how things used to work, and just deepens the tension over appointments.
Okay, shifting focus again, the digital world, the meta revelations you mentioned, brought up by Schumer and Blumenthal. What's the significance there?
It really throws a spotlight on this huge, growing policy challenge. How do we regulate big tech? Especially to protect vulnerable people like kids in these increasingly immersive virtual reality environments. The allegations about Meta suppressing internal research on child harm in VR, it just raises massive questions about transparency, corporate responsibility, how much these companies know, and what are they doing about it.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of that whole issue.
I think so. And then think about all those individual recognitions we talked about, the local leaders, the veterans, Miss Ohio even. It shows this other, maybe less reported, but really essential function of Congress, doesn't it? Reflecting local wins, honoring service, amplifying community stories. That's where the legislative branch connects directly with everyday life, often totally separate from the partisan noise.
And finally, you mentioned the Lumbee tribe. Tell us about that ongoing story.
Yeah, the fight for full federal recognition for the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. They've had state recognition for ages, but federal status has been denied since way back in 1956. It's just this powerful, ongoing reminder of historical injustices and the sheer persistence needed to try and fix them through legislation. It ties into that broader narrative of civil rights, indigenous sovereignty. Some fights take generations.
So bringing it all together, what does this packed week signal for what's coming next?
Well, the dynamics we've seen really set the stage for some crucial decisions ahead.
We can definitely anticipate more intense negotiations on those outstanding appropriations bills, right? The budget fights aren't over.
Not by a long shot. And the threat of a government shutdown, it's still very real, especially when you consider vital programs like the National Flood Insurance Program could lapse. That would directly hit millions of people if Congress doesn't find a way forward.
And on the military front, even as the NDAA moves along, those debates about social issues wrapped up in defense spending, they're not going away, are they?
No, absolutely not. Those culture war flashpoints seem firmly embedded in Washington debates now. They'll keep cropping up in legislative discussions for sure.
And looking beyond Congress, that push for the Epstein files release, the focus on the Kids Online Safety Act, it signals more scrutiny on powerful institutions.
I think so,
Yeah.
especially big tech. It suggests a growing legislative effort to hold these entities accountable for their societal impact. We're likely to see a continued, maybe even growing, focus on data security, online protections, especially for kids. That whole digital age governance conversation is just ramping up.
And finally, those key nominations will keep being a flashpoint.
Absolutely. The battle over executive appointments looks set to remain a major fault line in the Senate. It takes up a lot of floor time, deepens partisan divides, and makes every single confirmation feel like a high-stakes showdown.
Okay, so for you, our listener, wanting to stay engaged, stay informed after hearing all this, what are some concrete steps?
Well, first off, you can actually find details on pretty much everything we talked about today. The specific bill numbers like HR 3838 for the NDAA, S 2296 for that Epstein Files Amendment, the roll call votes, who sponsored what. It's all on congress.gov. It's a fantastic public resource, really invaluable for transparency.
And if any of these specific issues really hit home for you, maybe the Lumbee tribe's fight, the future of military policy, protecting kids online, don't hesitate to reach out to your representative or your senators. Seriously, your voice does matter in shaping how these conversations unfold on Capitol Hill.
Definitely. And another tip, keep an eye on upcoming committee hearings, like the Senate Armed Services hearing on General Christopher Mahoney's nomination is coming up, or just follow the progress of those appropriations bills through committee. Understanding that committee stage gives you so much insight into how legislation really gets shaped, often before it even hits the main floor.
All right, let's wrap up with a final thought for you to maybe chew on. Today's deep dive showed us a Congress wrestling with everything from, huge global conflicts down to really personal definitions of identity. In a landscape where so many debates get framed as just us versus them, what individual actions, something beyond just voting, do you think is most effective right now for bridging some of those divides and maybe fostering some genuine progress in our democracy? Something to think about.